So what is identity governance, and why do you care about governing identity? Nick, this kind of talks to your world, right? In the beginning, right?
Are you calling me old, Al?
We're the same age. I'm like 3 months older than you, right?
Yes, but I'm alarmingly better looking.
It's just the sunglasses at night, right? And that's also an 80s song, right? But when we look at the world as we used to know it in the old days, mainframes, PCs moved to sort of data centers, and then public cloud showed up, and then we've got IoT, and now with added AI, right? Nick, what was your experience with Windows NT domains? That's a Server 2000 thing, right?
Oh, good gosh. I would love to say that those things have gone away, Al, but actually they haven't. So in the data center, and you may you may hear us say this a few times, we now still have this 24-year-old, 25-year-old attack platform if we take 1999 into consideration. And Al, the best thing that we had in those days is we moved from LANman to NTLM, and we were relatively secure, and we had these firewalls that we hugged, and we hugged our firewalls. And if something was really, really bad and a hack was in place, we'd run into the data center and pull out the cable from the firewall, and we'd be safe again.
Yes, and even moving to the cloud, right? We still talk to customers today that believe their perimeter network is sovereign, and that this firewall with kilometers, I had a guy say to me, Nick, kilometers of fiber, that they secure perimeter security. You know, and we've seen how identities used to get compromised. In the old days, it was a brute force attack, password spray. You know, we want to hack the password, and then we figure out what PASSWRD, because everyone used that, or their date of birth, or whatever that looked like, right? Moving into the cloud, Azure AD, the artist, well, Entra ID, the artist formerly known as Azure AD, conditional access, which we are going to be talking about. There's some zero trust madness in there. And then passwordlessness, passwordless, FIDO keys, those sorts of things, right?
I think it's worth adding as well that the kind of threats that we were facing in the data center when it was just a password spray or a hash deconstruct, then we moved over to somewhat more organized attacks when we had things that were actually linked to organized crime. And what we have now in cloud is very, very sophisticated attacks that not only attack an application and not only attack the identity, but we have a very sophisticated attack landscape where attackers often know more about us and our habits than we know about ourselves and attack us accordingly.
Well, the primary reason for this conversation is because there is no firewall, Nick. You can deploy a firewall, but most people go to portal.office.com from a beach in the Maldives, and they access this stuff, right? So when we look at this world, we can, and this is a statement, we can no longer think of the world the same way we did when we talked about VPN of sadness and a firewall, right?
That's right.
It's not a thing, right? So you have to get your security configuration. And shit, man, I want to just bring back all those slides from the last 4 webinars to talk about this. Your security is critical, and it's no longer the firewall. You have to care about your identity, right? And we talk about why identity is important because, Nick, Midnight Blizzard, what was compromised?
Oh, well, it started with a password spray, which is unfortunate, right? And that sounds like an identity, Al.
Exactly, right? Business email compromise. In the last webinar, we talked about I think it was the FBI that's got this complaints thing, right? But in the last webinar, business email compromise costed the US, I think it was about $4 billion in 2023 or 2022. It's in the previous webinar.
That's right.
And what did they compromise? Well, yes, email, but how did they get in?
Through an identity. It's nearly as expensive as a boat running into a bridge.
And we've seen those videos on TikTok, right? And if you don't believe us, everyone is talking about some form of security, or in this case, identity security governance. There's even a governance framework. out of the Infotech research group, because, don't just listen to us crazy guys talking about this, and, we'll talk the ear of a donkey, because we believe so passionately about the only way to fix your security. Well, no, let me rephrase. The best way, no, the recommended way is to fix your identity, right? So, Nick, you've spent a lot of time in the zero trust space, right? We always talk about identity. What are your actual feelings about identity in the cloud?
So I'm doing this out without a zero trust slide, and I told you I was going to talk to it in my head, but now I actually get to talk to it out loud. And the way that I feel about zero trust and identity in cloud is that we really have to embrace religion. And it's the religion of not having any exceptions to the rules that govern identity. We had a friend of mine does post-breach analysis, and 110,000 user tenant was compromised because 11 users did not have MFA, and one of them was password sprayed. Well, all of them were password sprayed because passwords are meaningless, but one account got popped. And because there was no fanaticism, there was no religious zeal around identities, one identity got compromised, and then the attacker moved laterally.
So what you're saying is that people should become identity fundamentalists, right?
That's right.
All right. So now that we've defined why identity is the most important part of what you do in the cloud, how do you actually govern these things, right? Again, hip hop cat, right? Now,